The age I am at 57, I missed Hank Sr. He died in 52. But for me, it's Merle Haggard.
What if the nicest guy in country music, the humble legend Vince Gill, was secretly keeping score all along? At 68, he's finally revealed the 7 names he never forgave. And trust me, they're not who you'd expect. From silent feuds to backstage showdowns, this isn't just about music. It's about loyalty, legacy, and lines you don't cross. Stick around, because the last name on that list will completely change how you see him and them. They once called him the gentleman of country music, a soft-spoken soul with a golden voice and a heart that seemed untouchable. But behind that polished grin and humble persona, there are whispers of tension, a quiet reckoning that Vince Gill has carried through the years. What if the image we've cherished wasn't the full story? What if beneath the calm surface lay a ledger of disappointments, rivalries, and principles too sacred to compromise? At 68, Vince Gill stands as a revered icon in Nashville's glittering scene. Yet insiders claim that beneath his calm demeanor is a sharp memory, a perfectionist spirit that never forgets who crossed the line. There are 7 names, they say, 7 stories, none of them ending in harmony. His journey began with nothing but grit and a guitar. Vince, born in Norman, Oklahoma, was raised under the stern but influential eye of his father, a federal judge with a musical side. It wasn't the kind of household where dreams were handed out freely. Vince earned his path one hard lesson at a time. He played in basement bands, hopped from one bluegrass gig to the next, and scraped by on gas station sandwiches while chasing the kind of authenticity that can't be manufactured. His break came with Pure Prairie League, where his mix of heartfelt melodies and razor-sharp technique caught the industry's ear. And just like that, he rose, but not without watching the ground shift beneath him. As his own star climbed, Vince watched the music he loved begin to mutate. Country was changing rapidly. Gone were the days of aching honesty and quiet reflection. In their place came spectacle, strobe lights, mass appeal, and booming stadiums. For Vince, who built his reputation on soul-stirring ballads and precision guitar work, it felt like the soul of the genre was being sold off for applause. He didn't voice it publicly, but the quiet disappointment lingered in his eyes. And then there was the list, never written, but etched into his memory all the same. The first name, Garth Brooks, the juggernaut who turned country into a high-octane arena show. Where Vince cherished subtlety, Garth thrived on shock and awe, headset mics, explosions, and sky-high stages. The contrast couldn't be starker. According to whispers in the industry, Garth once extended a collaboration offer in the early 2000s. Vince declined, not for lack of time, but out of principle. In a world trading heart for hype, Vince couldn't play second fiddle to a fireworks show. That tension wasn't just about style, it cut deeper. Vince believed in music that felt lived in, where every lyric held a story. Garth, for all his success, seemed to represent a movement that left depth behind in favor of commercial domination. It wasn't personal, but it was defining. That unspoken riff set the tone for what came next. The second name on that mental list? Travis Tritt. Both men soared during the 90s, but while Vince leaned into tradition and polish, Tritt strutted through country's outlaw revival. Leather jackets, barroom bravado, and a rebel streak that burned hot. The two were oil and water. Rumors flew after a benefit concert in 1997, where Vince allegedly made a veiled jab about outlaws who couldn't write a verse. Travis didn't take kindly to it. While nothing was ever confirmed, the icy tension backstage was enough to spark a dozen country gossip columns. To Vince, authenticity wasn't just about image, it was about craftsmanship. And Tritt's swagger rubbed against that belief like sandpaper. Then came a quieter conflict, one that never made headlines but simmered behind closed doors. Shania Twain, the queen of crossover. Her fusion of country and pop redefined the genre, pulling it into the mainstream with dazzling success. But for traditionalists like Vince, it felt like watching the genre lose its spine. He never criticized her publicly, but sources close to him recall closed-door conversations filled with worry. Not anger, just heartbreak. He respected her talent, no doubt, but he mourned what her rise represented, a shift from the roots he loved to something glossy and unrecognizable. The fourth chapter in this hidden narrative involved Toby Keith, whose bombastic, chest-thumping patriotism and larger-than-life persona clashed with Vince's softer, introspective style. Keith's swagger didn't sit well with Gill's preference for nuance and empathy. Though both men found success, their paths rarely crossed. When they did, the mutual frost was unmistakable. Vince, ever the gentleman in public, avoided confrontation. But his silence spoke volumes. In a genre where values once bound artists together, Vince found himself increasingly isolated, holding fast to a disappearing code. Even within collaborative circles, friction brewed. Keith Urban, the Australian heartthrob with guitar chops and pop appeal, was admired by many, but Vince, whose standard for musicianship was sky-high, reportedly felt Urban leaned too heavily on production over raw performance. While they appeared friendly in public, those who worked behind the scenes sensed an unspoken tension, a respect that came with reservations. Vince wanted substance, not sizzle. These quiet conflicts didn't diminish Vince's legacy, they deepened it. Because through it all, he never chased trends or bowed to pressure. He held firm to what he believed country music should be. His refusal to compromise became a legacy in itself. While others adapted or evolved with the times, Vince became a compass for fans seeking something real. And that's what makes this chapter in his life so compelling. It's not a story of feuds or flameouts. It's about principle. About a man who, in a world of flashing lights and streaming metrics, chose instead to write songs that mattered. In an industry obsessed with reinvention, Vince Gill stayed exactly who he was. And in doing so, became something rarer than fame. He became timeless. Kris Kristofferson was the outlaw bard of country music, rough around the edges, unfiltered, and emotionally raw. His gravelly voice and poetic musings resonated with millions, making him a living legend. But to Vince Gill, Kristofferson's brilliance came wrapped in disorder. Where fans saw soulful rebellion, Vince saw reckless abandon. Their worlds were too different to meet in the middle. Vince cherished discipline, clean arrangement, and melodic precision, traits that stood in direct contrast to Kris's off-the-cuff genius. Though Vince never once publicly criticized Kristofferson, his silence at industry tributes and his consistent omission of Kris's name in speeches and interviews spoke volumes. The absence was haunting, like a door left intentionally closed. And in Nashville, where words carry weight, sometimes silence is the loudest statement of all. Then came Billy Ray Cyrus, the man with the mullet and a mega hit. Achy Breaky Heart catapulted Billy Ray into the pop culture stratosphere, turning him into a household name overnight. But while fans danced and the charts exploded, Vince watched the phenomenon unfold with deep discomfort. To him, that song wasn't a triumph, it was a turning point, and not for the better. Behind closed doors, he reportedly joked that the song set country music back 10 years. It wasn't music to him, it was an impersonation with a southern accent. Vince and Billy Ray never shared a stage, never exchanged tributes, and never collaborated. Billy chased charts, Vince chased stories. One thrived in the moment, the other was chasing something timeless. And in that unspoken gap, a feud quietly bloomed. Shania Twain stood in a category all her own, a powerhouse whose fusion of pop and country redefined what the genre could look and sound like. Her meteoric rise broke every barrier, reaching fans far beyond Nashville. She glimmered in sequins, danced to pop rhythms, and became a global icon. But in Vince's eyes, something got lost in the sparkle. While he never criticized her publicly, he never applauded either. No shared stages, no recorded duets, no words of recognition. It wasn't bitterness, it was heartbreak. To Vince, Shania's success marked the moment when country music stopped singing about lives and started mimicking the top 40. It was as if the soul of the genre was traded for glitter, and Vince simply couldn't bear to sing along. Then there was Jason Aldean, the modern face of bro country. His music pumped through tailgate parties and country bars, filled with beer-soaked verses and electric guitar riffs. Aldean was a commercial beast, drawing huge crowds and dominating playlists with his hard-partying small-town anthems. But for Vince, who believed every verse should carry truth and every chorus a memory, Aldean's songs felt empty. Not wrong, just hollow. Vince was the kind of artist who wanted his lyrics to sit with you long after the music stopped. Jason wanted his fans to crank the volume. That difference in philosophy kept them apart. Vince avoided award shows where Aldean was the main event and reportedly turned down requests to present him with trophies. It wasn't about ego, it was about preservation. Vince was guarding something sacred, and in Aldean's booming success, he saw yet another crack in the foundation. Vince's disconnection from this new wave of country music wasn't rooted in bitterness, it came from devotion. He had sacrificed too much, weathered too many storms, and protected too many lyrics to watch the genre become something he couldn't recognize. His quiet resistance wasn't flashy, but it was firm. It was a protest written in absence, a man choosing stillness over applause when applause no longer meant what it used to. While others adapted and rode the wave of modern country, Vince held his ground like a lighthouse watching the tide roll in. Yet what makes Vince's story so compelling isn't just who he distanced himself from, it's why. At the core of every decision was a deep reverence for country music as a vessel of truth. He believed songs should speak of hardship, love, redemption, and heartbreak, not just parties and pickup trucks. He didn't hate the new faces, he simply couldn't walk the same path. It was about lineage, not limelight. And Vince, who once slept in vans just to play for 10 people, had no interest in chasing numbers. He was chasing legacy. Behind the scenes, Vince was known as someone who'd stop mid-recording if a lyric didn't feel honest enough. He once scrapped an entire track because the sentiment didn't sit right in his gut. That level of commitment wasn't just rare, it was sacred. And while he never shouted it from the rooftops, his choices whispered it over time. Every name he didn't mention, every stage he didn't step on, every award he quietly declined, they were chapters in a larger story. One about staying true when the world asks you to change. The tension between tradition and reinvention has always existed in music. But for Vince Gill, that battle was personal. He wasn't just a performer, he was a guardian. And though he carried his convictions quietly, they left a mark everywhere he went. In every standing ovation he politely declined. In every glossy show he chose not to attend, Vince was drawing a line in the sand, softly but with unwavering certainty. As fans and critics tried to decode his career, what emerged was not a man with enemies, but an artist with unshakable values. Vince Gill wasn't building fences, he was building a sanctuary, a place where country music still whispered truths, told stories that mattered, and lingered in the heart long after the spotlight faded. And as we inch closer to the final names on that silent list, one thing becomes clear. Vince didn't just walk his own path, he paved it. He was never one to raise his voice, but Vince Gill's silence often spoke volumes louder than the roars of stadium crowds. And perhaps nowhere was that silence more piercing than when the name Kanye West surfaced. Kanye, with his unapologetic declarations and whirlwind controversies, seemed like the polar opposite of Vince in every way. Vince never called him out directly. He didn't need to. Instead, he voiced disdain for those who, in his words, built castles out of chaos instead of songs with soul. When Kanye claimed the title of the greatest living artist, Vince was quiet. But in that quiet, you could feel the weight of decades spent respecting every note, every lyric, every fan. To Vince, music wasn't a throne to sit on, it was a truth to live by. And in that contrast, the unspoken clash of philosophies echoed louder than any diss track. Then there was Travis Tritt, once a brother in arms, now a distant echo. Both were 90s country giants, rising during the same boom, singing on the same awards shows, chasing the same crown. But there was always a line dividing them. Vince leaned into melody and message, Travis leaned into grit and growl. One night at a benefit, Vince cracked a pointed joke about certain outlaws who couldn't pen a verse if their career depended on it. Travis heard it, and backstage he didn't laugh. Word has it he locked eyes with Vince, no words needed. After that, they were never seen sharing a mic again. No open feuds, no press wars, just a curtain quietly drawn between two men who had once shared the same spotlight. This isn't a tale built on bitterness or petty rivalries. It's a deeper reckoning. Every name Vince distanced himself from was part of a larger story, a story of an artist trying to preserve something sacred in an industry that was sprinting toward flash and fame. For Vince, music was memory. It was love, loss, and everything in between. And as the genre bent to commercial pressures, Vince didn't fight with tweets or headlines. He just left the room. He declined festival invites, skipped joint performances, and quietly pulled away from the noise, as if he was shielding something fragile from the storm. It wasn't retreat, it was defiance through stillness. In an era where silence is rare and outrage is currency, Vince chose reverence, and perhaps that's what makes his choices all the more powerful. While many artists chased spectacle, Vince stayed in the studio, sweating over lyrics, obsessing over guitar phrasing, and singing not for awards, but for meaning. His battle wasn't with individuals. It was with the direction the art form was being pushed. Each unreturned call, each declined duet, each name never mentioned. These were his quiet protests, his refusal to dilute the heart of the genre for temporary applause. But despite all the distances and the names that never made it into liner notes, Vince Gill's legacy remains untouched, and in many ways, unmatched. He didn't need to ride every wave because he had built his own river. His songs still carry that weight, that softness edged with heartbreak, that reverence for stories too real to ignore. While others branded themselves for relevance, Vince chose reflection. While the spotlight burned bright elsewhere, he embraced the shadows, crafting moments that would last longer than the current chart cycle. And though his public image remained one of warmth and humility, Vince has long been a man of discerning taste. His lifestyle, while quiet, echoes that sense of refined simplicity. Over the years, he's surrounded himself with understated luxury. Classic black Mercedes-Benz sedans, a collection of vintage guitars worth more than most homes, and a fondness for Rolex watches that mark milestones rather than flaunt wealth. His Nashville estate is elegant, not extravagant, a place built for comfort and creativity, not headlines. He and wife Amy Grant have invested wisely in real estate and music publishing, ensuring long-term stability over flashy ventures. Vince has maintained solid insurance policies to safeguard his health, career income, and rare instruments, an artist thinking not just like a performer, but like a legacy protector. His approach to wealth offers a lesson in patience, purpose, and long-view thinking. Build slow, protect often, and never confuse popularity with permanence. As we look back on the long path Vince walked, it's impossible not to see the cost of staying true. He lost opportunities, fame, collaborations, and perhaps friendships, but he gained something far greater: authenticity that can't be bought, a discography without compromise, and the respect of those who still believe music should mean something. Where others chased the sound of the moment, Vince preserved the sound of the soul. His journey wasn't always visible, but it was always intentional. And in the age of algorithms and viral fame, he remained a rare breed, a man who let the music do the talking and walked away when it stopped speaking the truth. So as the curtain falls on this silent list, one thing becomes undeniable. Vince Gill didn't just live country music, he lived for it. And though the names he never mentioned might fill arenas, Vince's legacy fills hearts. His silence wasn't absence, it was presence, a powerful, unwavering stand for something deeper than fame. And in that quiet, Vince Gill said everything. So there you have it. Vince Gill, the soft-spoken country legend with a voice like velvet and a memory sharp as steel, has shown us a side few ever saw coming. He never shouted, never slammed the door, but his silence spoke volumes. From Garth Brooks's high-voltage theatrics to Shania Twain's chart-topping reinvention, Vince quietly watched the genre he loved twist and turn, always staying rooted in the music that moved him. This wasn't about petty grudges, it was about protecting something sacred. 7 names, 7 turning points. Each one marked a moment where Vince chose authenticity over applause. If you found yourself rethinking everything you knew about Vince Gill or the industry itself, don't forget to hit that like button. Drop a comment below and tell us which moment shocked you the most. And hey, if you're into deep dives like this one, go ahead and subscribe. We've got even more untold stories and hidden rivalries coming your way. Because in a world full of noise, Vince Gill chose melody over mayhem. And maybe, just maybe, that's why his story still sings louder than most. Stick with us, because the next name we uncover might just change everything you thought you knew.